week in business. Today we have Anthony and Kingsley, and we've got a lovely topic to talk about that's really important for every business owner to keep in mind when doing business. Anthony, over to you.
Look, we could give this topic a really coarse title, like Stop Doing Stuff That Doesn't Work, but we're going to have a focus on the positive today, and we're going to have a look at where people put their effort compared to where their results are. Now, every one of us in whatever form of business you'll be doing some kind of marketing. Even if you're not spending a cent, you'll be spending, effort and energy onto it in your own time. And too often we see, we go back to David Ogilvy's quote from probably nearly a century ago, which was, half of the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The only problem is I don't know which half. We still see that today, and yet we've got all the tools that are available for people to identify exactly where they're going to get a return on investment, and and they don't. So what I wanted to ask you, perhaps, Louise, was what are some of the tools that you think small businesses, or you, in your experience, small businesses can use to better evaluate where that spend goes?
Oh, sure. Well, there's a lot of things out there, isn't there? I think it's really about metrics, and I'm a real number lover. So I really love, having on your website, whether it's a plugin or whether it's a native tool on the website, of having a look at how many people are visiting, but how many people are actually buying when it comes to that thing. I think it's also really important to hang out where your ideal customer is. In my sort of business, there's a lot of sweat dollars that get put into my marketing. If I was to just have a website with some really wonderful SEO, people are still not going to find me because they don't know that they want or need a virtual assistant. So, it's making sure that I'm doing what's right for my ideal client. So for me, it's about social media. It's about adding value. Anthony and I were just talking about before exactly what social media you can look at. But you can be in any of them: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. As long as you are where your ideal client is and you're looking at those metrics, looking at that reach, looking at the engagement, all of those sorts of things to make sure you're actually hitting the mark. Because the last thing you want to look at is your Facebook going down by 150% in terms of your engagement. Yes, your reach might go down, but if your engagement drops, that's a whole different kettle of fish. That means people are just scrolling past you. So those are sort of the tools I look at mostly. But when I look at my customers, you could use any email software you like. You could use MailChimp, ActiveCampaign, ConvertKit, MailerLite. I'm pretty sure this list could go on for the next hour because there's so many of them out there. It doesn't really matter which one you use as long as you're actually using it. That's my thing. Use it and look at your metrics.
The metrics are a huge thing, and in our accounting side of things, as Kingsley mentioned last week, I think it was, we talked about a lot of businesses. The only time they look at their results is when they're doing their BAS, and perhaps even at that time it may only be at their turnover number and the bill they've got to pay to the ATO, which is a high level thing. Kingsley, do you have many businesses that actually build their marketing metrics into like a dashboard within their business?
Not really. Another one that I find fascinating is, again, if you were to take 100 small businesses' profit and losses, mum and dad size or thereabouts, in the revenue section, they often have one line that says sales. But then when you go to the expense section, of course, it's broken up into 20, 30, whatever. And so they can't even really say we sold more widget A's than widget B's.
I see that a lot between my clients as well.
So service streams that they might offer, you'd almost beyond just literally the raw revenue number. Lots of them can't tell you anything more than that. Some might have a bit of a physical measurement, but almost more by accident than design. So it's not very widespread. at all. And it's sort of, and it is sort of sometimes you point out things to people that sort of, like some of the systems where it can tell you, for instance, how many separate sales you had, so you can work out an average spend and a few of these sorts of things that people have never thought to ever do before. Broadly, no.
And what happens in that instance, my experience has been, is when you talk to people, they immediately go to their gut instinct. And so, oh, well, look, we're definitely selling more, probably 80% of our business is in widget A. And it's amazing how wrong our gut instincts can be. This time last year, when we were, all looking at it closely at our businesses, when COVID hit and we had the lockdown, my instinct had been for a long time that, it was the business that I've got here was relatively evenly spread across, a variety of industry sectors. And when I drilled down and really got into the details of it, yes, there is a wide variety of sectors, but it turned out somewhere between 70 and 80% of the total revenue base was dependent on hospitality and tourism, which is an industry that I thought, in Bunbury, there's no hospitality and tourism. Well, I was wrong. So that's given me, that experience of kind of drilling down into the numbers and looking at it has meant that I can look at it and all of a sudden say, right, well, that is a niche which we focused in. Albeit subconsciously, we need to broaden our exposure to avoid dependency on one particular sector. But the moral, I guess, of the story is don't just count on your gut feeling. Go and look at the reports, look at your advertising. The simple question that really should be asked for every single sale you get is, where did you hear about us? Now, the answer to that's not going to tell you the total answer to where you spend all your advertising, because attribution is often the last point in the equation. We'll look at it and say, oh, I heard about you on the sign out the front. It just so happens that I'd seen you 5 times on TV, heard you once on radio, saw 400 posts on Facebook before I saw that sign out the front that says come in. So don't go pulling all of that. It's not that simple, but it is as simple as looking at that and saying, where can we attribute some of this credit to? And one of the simplest solutions I've seen, and I loved it, was a little business in the CBD a few years back now, who had a bowl of marbles and a series of jars under the table. And when the customer told where they'd come from, they'd pick up a marble and drop it into one of the jars. And at the end of the week, they'd just do a quick count on it. That simple, that physical and tactile. There's no software or fancy attribution to it, but it was just a simple thing that they could ask the question. And of course, the other thing the boss would do, which I loved, is she'd count the number of marbles in jars, look at the till to see how many sales had gone through, and ask the staff how come they were missing, initially 80% and then 60%, and they got down to about 15% of sales they were missing, which I think is pretty good. But it just gave them that cross-reference to be able to check it there. So attribution's a huge thing as far as I'm concerned, because it means that you can spend more money and more time on the things that make you more money and get rid of the things that don't. So you can really focus on that. That's probably my little rant for the day. Is there anything you want to add, Kingsley or Louise?
Well, I guess one that might surprise you coming from an accountant is on the marketing front and what you're spending your money on is, of course, lots of people will say, word of mouth is the best, and because word of mouth costs nothing. And I always tell people, yes, it does. It's coded to wages, not marketing, in the sense that if you're getting great word of mouth, you must have great staff, and great staff will not be happy to be paid the same as crap staff, certainly not for any length of time. So it's not free. And then you also, I think, for some businesses, the amount of word of mouth referral you'll get may well be the level of growth in your business that you want and happy and let you achieve what you want. But you may find you want something above and beyond that, and so then you are going to have to look at the other mechanisms. But that it's somehow free. There's no opportunity cost. There is. And then that has to be weighed against the other types of marketing. Interesting too, what you were just talking about, Anthony, in that example too, is I think of what stops a lot of small business people from doing the more elaborate measuring systems, like where I'm talking about, where they just got sales and nothing else. If you're, if it's a single shop owner and they are standing at the till themselves, then they will feel very much like, I physically did every sale. I know that they bought apples and oranges and pears and bananas sort of thing, but it doesn't tell them what you're talking about, of why did they even come into your shop in the first place.
Yeah.
And again, some of them will also rely on, well, I do the purchasing, so I know there was a run on, screwdrivers, because I had to go and order a heap of screwdrivers in. But again, it doesn't tell you why did people come into your shop to buy their screwdriver. So
and there's so many biases in our memory in doing these things. If you placed an order for 1,000 screwdrivers, but put in 20 orders for 50 spanners, you'll remember the screwdriver order, but you probably won't remember the spanner order. And you go, gee, we sell a lot more screwdrivers than spanners. No, you've got that bias of what's most recent in your memory.
Yeah.
And also the big one is when you start to see something and you notice it, you see it all the time, and you miss all the other things that come in. So biases are a huge thing for gut feeling, and that's why I really advocate rely on the numbers and collect those numbers in a way that you can do something with them.
Yeah, and I think the classic one too of what you're saying is, so we sold a truckload of screwdrivers, but because we haven't done what you're talking about and don't really understand why that happened, right, crikey, let's go get 1,000 screwdrivers in, and whatever the reason behind buying screwdrivers this week, it's gone next week, and constantly I will hear owners come, oh, they all wanted screwdrivers last week and I bought a heap of them, now no one wants screwdrivers.
It's crazy. Face masks sold heaps in February, we haven't sold any since.
Yeah.
They sold heaps in those first 3 days in February, and then no one sold any more.
Yeah. So I'm not saying it's easy, but that is the problem of not doing what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, when you start talking about that marketing expense, it's easy to say, oh, well, I spent this much on Google advertising, or I spent this much on Facebook advertising. But like you're both saying, and I mentioned it before, the sweat dollars, and I call it that because Anthony mentioned it a few months ago and now it's stuck in my head, sweat dollars. The time that you spend connecting, building relationships, going to networking events, even if they're free, that's sweat dollars to build that word of mouth and build those referrals, whether you like it or not. That's time you've put into your business that you're not measuring. Like I have a budget, an hour budget that I spend each day on social media connecting with people, and that's what I spend connecting with people for my business. But that's time that I put into my business, and I track that time. So, make sure that you're not just losing time by trying to do what you think is free marketing.
Yeah, I think the other issue with that too, it's not quite what you're talking, is a little bit tangential, but those extra hours are disproportionately the hard. Like if you've got two employees, one's doing the a religious 40-hour week, and the other one is going off to expos or events late at night, for an hour or so, they're just doing 45 hours a week, just one extra hour. They're not doing, whatever that works out to be, 12% more work. In my argument, they're working 100% harder because that's the hour they weren't home to see their wife and kids, or their husband and kids, or whatever. They missed out on helping with the homework, or that puts the real strain. That extra hour is the hardest hour. So in terms of valuing it, as you're saying, that so I'm doing this sort of free stuff. It's disproportionately expensive in a sense. Not to say you shouldn't do it, but you need to measure it accurately and recognise what it really is.
And just my last point on that is do it where your ideal client is.
Absolutely critical. It's so easy. I use the analogy of fishing because I saw a post recently on a community page that said, well, business owners, this was at Christmas time, it says, business owners deserve a holiday too in this particular town. And I thought, I'm a shocking fisherman. If you want to know where the fish aren't, look where I'm fishing. And if the same applies in a business, don't go and do stuff because you're there. Go and do stuff because that's where the customers are. Spend your effort. If your customers, the type of people you work with, are on Facebook, go that place. If you're working with a creative audience and they're going to be on Instagram and appreciate that, go there. If you're dealing with younger, a really younger audience, think about perhaps TikTok or Snapchat. But don't get caught into the idea that, well, I'm good at this, so this must be the place to go. You'd be astonished how many networks there are. I recently came across a fellow who was a world leader and it had, I think, something in the vicinity of about 400,000 followers on Twitch, which is a gaming platform where he streams himself fishing. It's popular. There you go. So you can build it in any platform, provided you're targeting the right people and you're putting the right energy into it. But just be conscious that it's not right or wrong using one or the other. It's just easier or harder. So it's, given we're all got limited resources, limited hours in the week, focus your effort on those places where the people are. Fish where the fish are rather than where you feel like fishing.
And track those metrics, guys. Track those metrics so you know that you're fishing in the right spot. All right. Well, I think that's it for us today. What do you reckon, guys? Anything else to add?
Nope.
No? All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we will see you all again next week.
Excellent.
Righto.